And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, him.
It's your Sunday show, New York's Finest Unfiltered Podcast. John, did you see the charades from the NYPD? Dude, it was hilarious. I'm the most complained cop, NYPD. Of course, with me is John McCarry, retired lieutenant. But, John, did you see it? It was hysterical. Kaz Daughtry, of course, the star of the show, and John Schell were doing a ride-along. But get this. You ready? Not only did they do a ride-along in an RMP, which is a car, they did a ride-along in a helicopter. It was hysterical. I could not stop laughing for 4th of July. I'm still laughing thinking about it.
Celebrities without the muscle, baby. That's it. You know, with all of that, I don't know, dude. That's why they spend an extra $12 million on NYPD helicopters, because they're using it for their own personal whim. Adams is flying in the Hamptons in helicopters. You got John Schell and Kaz Daughtry pretending to be media stars doing ride-alongs with the media. From what I know, the media has their own helicopters. I don't know why New York City taxpayers need to pay for that. If the media wants to take you up to get your perspective and point of view, they should pay for it themselves. What the hell are New York City residents putting the bill for? And it's all a bunch of games anyway. It's a joke. These guys think that they're movie stars, and then the furthest thing from it.
Yeah, this is what happens when you have useful idiots in power. This is when you have inadequate, immature personnel that become in a position of leadership, just like Kaz Daughtry. Kaz Daughtry is the Deputy Commissioner of Operations. For our viewers out there, if you're new to this channel, Kaz Daughtry was a detective, and he was only promoted to detective because he is part of the circle of nepotism, and that's what this specific episode is about. We titled it "Is Nepotism Corrupting the NYPD's Disciplinary System?" And of course, Kaz Daughtry is the pinnacle, quintessential case that actually involves nepotism, because he was a detective, because he drove around Chief Madry, and eventually he was promoted to Deputy Commissioner of Operations, and I'm sure soon to be Commissioner if Mayor Eric Adams does not get indicted. But what's interesting about that is Kaz Daughtry has abused his power. I believe it's a misuse of power. We're utilizing every tool possible so that he could be at the forefront and be some type of superstar. Why isn't the cops doing the ride-alongs? Why is Kaz Daughtry, who's not only the Deputy Commissioner of Operations, but he's in a civilian position, but he's doing the ride-alongs to show what it's like to do enforcement in the police department of the NYPD for New York City? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, before we get into what we're going to talk about, I honestly think there's a huge power struggle in the NYPD right now. I think you're seeing a lot of people vying to be the next police commissioner after the illustrious Ed Caban gets sent out to green pastures. But I think what we're seeing from Kaz Daughtry, it really is. It's honestly political theater. That's what you're seeing. You're seeing political theater being played out. Taxpayer funds are being used to do this, to try to bring himself up. But I think you're right. I think when you look at nepotism, I think he's the quintessential. He's the poster child for nepotism. He's the poster child for nepotism. He should have been fired. He lied in front of a judge. He lied in an official hearing, made false official statements. And instead of being appropriately charged in the NYPD, he was given charges that wouldn't ultimately lead to his termination. And he was elevated 7 ranks after pleading guilty to being not truthful in an official hearing. So, I mean, that twice. And that's the second time, once in front of a judge, once in an official hearing. Then he gets promoted. And then you got a guy like John Schell, another guy who probably should have been fired earlier on than elevated to the rank of chief of patrol. You have Ed Caban, who's been accused of cheating on a sergeant's test, and even the judge said it more than likely happened than it didn't. Like saying, yeah, no, this guy cheated, I just couldn't prove it. That's basically what I read when I read that official statement. And there's so much corruption around them, and there's so many low integrity moves around them. I mean, it just shows what it's not what you know. It's not what you do. It's not how competent you are. It's who you know in New York City, and especially in the NYPD, that's going to get you ahead.
I thought the same thing when I saw the case of Ed Caban being accused of cheating, the allegation against him. I thought it was pretty much solidified because it's civil in nature. And anytime it's civil in nature, it's not about reasonable doubt. It's about preponderance of evidence. And when we look at the preponderance of evidence was met, which means 51% chance you did it versus 49% chance you did it. So, speaking of Ed Caban, let's talk about Ed Caban hiding disciplinary cases. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'd love to know your thoughts on that. Why wasn't any of your cases hidden? And I mean, I think that it leads to public mistrust, and it should. One, why? Why are you removing these cases from the CCRB's purview? What is the reasoning for that? That's the number one question I think the media should be asked. Why? If the system is fair, if the system is just, if CCRB is your partner, if NYPD's disciplinary investigations are fair, why are they going a different route than everyone else? What's selective about these cases? Whose cases are they? And I think the worst thing that I seen in there was that the complainants aren't even notified. So you say Eric Dim violated me for whatever reason. Caban takes your case, doesn't give it to the CCRB. It goes a completely indifferent investigative route, and you don't even know about it. I think that's the worst. I think that's the worst thing that I've heard there.
I think you're absolutely right. That's why I was hoping that we jump right into it. Absolutely. I think the great point to look at, for instance, so I had a case against myself. We've talked about numerous times on a podcast where I was wrestling with a perpetrator in the cells. There was every reason to believe that the perpetrator was secreting a firearm in his crotch. The perpetrator did not want to get searched, did not want to get touched. This perpetrator was wanted for robbery. He had 20-some-odd felony arrests. Actually, at the time of my administrative trial for CCRB, this perpetrator was in Rikers for trying to stab a Parkchester peace officer. And in addition to that, he sliced a correctional officer to the face. This is the type of perpetrator we're dealing with. I was accused, the allegation was that I tried to stick my finger in this perp's ass to get a firearm, which is absolutely ridiculous. Eventually, I was found not guilty of that case. It went to trial. But why is that case open to public record when I was found not guilty? And actually, if you look at that case on the 58, which is public record about my civilian complaints, it does not reflect that I was found not guilty. It still says substantiated. That's the case that should have been removed from the public's purview, from the public's public eye.
I mean, there's two things here. One, it's either high-level corruption, or two, the system is so broken that he's shielding his friends and friends of his friends from receiving discipline and going the exact route that 99.9% of New York City police officers will go when accused of an allegation. I'm going to say right now, I'm going to say that one, these people are in the circle of nepotism, that he pulled the cases. And two, the cases were so egregious that there was no way they weren't going to get substantiated and found guilty of those. So I'm saying right now, this is high level corruption. This is just another. We did an episode last week on how he basically rewarded someone who lied about the mandate, submitted a fake vaccine card, and basically rewarded that officer by only giving her 85 days vacation days taken away from her, when other people lost their career for holding on to truth and integrity. Lie, you get to keep your job, you get a little bit of a civil penalty. Tell the truth, we're going to fire you. So you see that there's a very low integrity corruption twinge when it comes to Ed Caban. I don't believe he's so smart. I don't think he's a smart man at all. I don't think he politically he sees the big picture. I just don't. I mean, just from the moves he sees that we see that it appears by all means he does not control the NYPD whatsoever. It appears Kaz Daughtry is the police commissioner by all means, in my opinion. I see Kaz Daughtry as the police commissioner. I don't see Ed Caban as it. And any moves that Ed Caban does, it's favoritism. It's promotions. And now it went from promotions for unwarranted promotions, in my opinion, to now this. I mean, we're literally removing transparency from the public. In the height of the transparency age, this is just further removal of transparency. This creates further mistrust between cops and communities. Eric Adams' administration is doing a horrible, horrible job, not only at policing, not only at combating crime, but when it comes to community relations and actually showing the NYPD is a public service and a public good. They're failing on every single end of it.
You know, I always made it a practice that anytime there was new literature for the NYPD, that I would make sure that I would put my finger on it and I would read it. And I would always make sure that I would read things, understood it. Because you could read something and you have to read it over and over till you're blue in the face. That was always my practice, so that you actually understood it and that it was actually in your neural pathways. And sometimes when you read things several times, you see things that you didn't see before, and you start to get a different understanding of what is actually meant in that literature. So I've swore to be the catalyst for change for the Civilian Complaint Review Board, the Disciplinary Matrix. John has spoken about the vaccine mandate. And it's amazing how all these things tie into, is nepotism corrupting the NYPD's disciplinary system? The NYPD has been plagued by corruption, but the corruption that we see in this era is focused from nepotism. Nepotism is at the forefront. It's the pinnacle point that you could actually put your finger on, and you can actually blatantly see it, that has corrupted the disciplinary system and the entire NYPD, which ultimately affects public safety also. So it's interesting. We talk about how does this tie into the disciplinary matrix. So I remember the disciplinary matrix came out in January 2021. Dermot Shea signed off with it along with the New York City Council and those that were involved in this doctrine. And I said to myself at the time, I read it, when others did not read it, they weren't looking at it. And cops told me, don't worry about that. It's not a big deal. It is what it is. John, we hear that all the time. And I said, wait a minute. Look at this thing. And I said to myself, why would Dermot Shea sign off on this? It seems like the most ridiculous document to me. And it seems that the NYPD would not have control anymore. But when I start to get into it further, it really exemplified what John and I have been talking about, is that it is a great document for the NYPD because the NYPD loves to circle everything around nepotism. Because if you are part of that circle of nepotism, this doctrine could save your career. You could get the mitigating factors. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. You could rename the mitigating factors to nepotism. The presumptive could just be automatic penalty, and aggravating factors could be everyone else, general population of the NYPD. If you're general population of the NYPD, you will get substantiated complaints just as I did. You will get the most severe penalties. If you're John McCary, and let's not talk about the disciplinary system, just because you're not in that circle of nepotism, you will have to make the decision if you want to stay on the job and get that shot or not. But if you are someone of low integrity and you have the right connections, you can lie. You could produce 2 fake vaccine cards. You could become commissioner and cheat on your test. You could become the deputy commissioner of operations when you lose credibility in the court system, and you'll get that mark of nepotism, which is ultimately mitigating factors, and it will save your career. But yet, if you're Marlon Bethel and you leave the NYPD on good terms because you're honest, true, and credible, you will no longer be employed by the NYPD, same as John McCary. And that's why we're in this precarious position, talking about that nepotism has corrupted the NYPD's disciplinary system. And now Ed Caban has taken this even further, and bam, touchdown. He has protected himself, members of the Hispanic Society, and the NYPD's corrupted system can no longer be credible. And I'm hoping at some point the New York City Council is going to put their finger and say, wait a minute, this document that we signed off on has been completely misused. This has been used so that you could take care of your friends. Why is it that someone could get mitigating factors for the same thing? If you look in a one-way mirror, that would be aggravating factors. And someone else could be in a position where they're telling the truth, but they've been caught making infractions, and they will get 75 to 100 days penalty. And yet, this is what the point we're at right now, where this document can no longer be viewed as a document for the basis of actual discipline, because it's been totally misused. And again, that's why I say the disciplinary matrix is flawed, and it needs to be removed from the police department immediately.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. There's really a lot what you're saying. I mean, I think that you're saying that not only does the matrix have to be removed, I think internal affairs needs to be also outsourced to a non-biased a non-biased, non-mayoral, non-NYPD police commissioner controlled investigative body to oversee the NYPD. And it's sad to say that, because I mean, we see that a third party watchdog, right, police oversight watchdog, is completely politicized, and we can't trust that aspect either. So I mean, what we're seeing is like a totally broken system inside of New York City. I mean, it's just, it's just, the NYPD's disciplinary system is a microcosm of the justice system. I mean, if they can't run an internal structured disciplinary system, how do you expect them to properly run the criminal justice system in New York City? I think it's laughable. We're talking about oversight of 35,000 individuals who were involved in millions of incidents on New York City streets. But if you can't control that, how could you control 12 million people inside of hundreds of millions of incidents? So, I mean, the NYPD's disciplinary system should mirror our criminal justice system, where cops, when accused of something, are given due process and are given fair and speedy trials. And there is one standard for all. But clearly, there is not one standard for all. I mean, just think about what you just said. I mean, it's wild, right? You could flake someone on New York City streets, lie to the judge, then later on in your career, lie in an official investigation. The allegations that you're charged with won't match exactly what you did, and you'll just plead guilty, and it won't be an terminable offense for you, even though somebody else would be subject to termination, and you'll just get promoted through the ranks, and no big deal. And now you're taking the media on helicopter tours. You could shoot someone in the back and kill them, lie about it on the stand, the judge say that you're lying about it on the stand, get promoted, and now you also be taking people on media tours. The level of integrity in the NYPD is horrible. I mean, because even cops don't trust the system. The cops don't trust who's running the New York City Police Department. So if the cops, and now you have retired cops like us who are no longer in the system, saying that it's broken, and it's been broken, and it's gotten significantly worse since even when Dermot Shea put this in. I think what is the public saying? The public is saying, we can't trust these cops. They're not good. It's not a public good. And now it is leading to a portion where I see people who are anti-police following the memes we're doing on the podcast and sharing them. And meanwhile, they hate me and you. They've threatened our lives. They've threatened our families, and yet they're agreeing with half of the things we're saying, because they're saying, well, look how corrupted the system is. Look how corrupted it is. When it comes to us being threatened, no, they don't care about that. They're saying, well, you guys were part of the system, and now you guys are two flunkies. So I think honestly, it really is insane. I mean, we'll go through this article, but I can't agree with you more. I think it's a completely broken system in New York City. And honestly, I think that the entire upper echelon of the NYPD needs to be immediately removed, and something needs to happen. This disciplinary matrix really needs to go. Honestly, I think there needs to be a committee to figure out how to have a standard of operating procedure when it comes to NYPD discipline, because obviously the system's not working, and Adams and his cronies corrupted it.
I mean, at this point, fortunately, for the general population of the NYPD, that the police commissioner is still the de facto, the last line of defense for the police officers when it comes to discipline. It's still in the hands of the police commissioner. But if we continue to see this lack of integrity, this compromised integrity from the upper echelon of the NYPD, eventually the general population is going to lose that. For years, the Civilian Complaint Review Board has stomped their feet and argued that the police commissioner should not be the last person to make the decision on discipline, that it should be outsourced. And unfortunately, Police Commissioner Ed Caban, who is the most insignificant police commissioner we've ever seen, and I think he's just a complete moron, and he's definitely just someone that, He will be remembered and legendary for partying, but he's going to be insignificant when it comes to being a police commissioner. But he has lost the trust of the public. The public cannot find the police department credible to say, yeah, I can see why the police commissioner does make the last decision. I can see why it's still in the hands of the police department because it's the ultimate police perspective. But he's given the Civilian Complaint Review Board a great argument of why it should be outsourced because the police department cannot be trusted. Because we see the disciplinary matrix that was enacted for this reason has been corrupted by nepotism. If you are in that circle of nepotism, in any case, those mitigating factors can save your career. And flip that coin, you could take the same person and say, you know what? That person is part of general population, and that person could be terminated, could be completely demonized, and that disciplinary matrix could be against them because they're part of general population. So the NYPD nepotism is so egregious, it has completely it has completely corrupted the entire disciplinary system, and it's corrupted the NYPD on its face. It's an epic fail.
I got to be honest, if I was accused of something right now and you told me that the New York City Police Commissioner, Ed Caban, gets the final say and I should be happy about it because I get a police perspective, I wouldn't be. I wouldn't be because, one, I'm not in the circle of nepotism. I know a few people that know him, and again, they all say he's a good guy. As far as when it comes to hanging out, he's not looking to hurt anybody. He was kept to himself. He's one of, all of those things, that he's not a bad guy. But I mean, what we're seeing is his friends are highly taken care of, right? So right then and there, you have to worry about, are you going to be the fall guy to get the friends off, right? Because it's not about the truth. It's about, let me protect my circle of friends first. Then politically, to me, it's not having Ed Caban have my final decision is no different than drawing a straw in New York City Council with all of the socialists in there and seeing if they're going to determine my fate. Because if it's a politically unfriendly situation, I don't know that he's not going to throw me under the bus too, because it'll save the mayor. It's an election year. It's this, it's that, because there isn't a standard. It's not about the truth. It's about protecting my friends. And part of protecting the friends is probably bigger than protecting the friends is protecting the mayor's political theater on the stage of New York City. And now that an election year is coming, there's going to be some sacrificial lambs, and there always been. And I think that's what you was talking about when you were talking about Dermot Shea signing off on the disciplinary matrix. He knew his son was never going to have to deal with the disciplinary matrix. The sacrificial lambs were the Eric Dims, the John McCarrys, the Marlon Bethels. Those guys are going to be the guys that are held to a standard, and they're going to be, look what we did. This guy did X, Y, Z, and he's, this is a paramilitary organization. Integrity is at the utmost, and we're going to throw them to the wolves. But the rest of the people that are around our friends, our nephews, our cousins, our kids, the guys we worked with, then those things are just suggestions. Laws, the patrol guide, standard operating procedure, integrity, honesty. That's just a suggestion for people like that.
I remember back when we did the Disciplinary Matrix podcast, you and I would talk about this constantly. I mean, we've been talking about this for almost 2 years. We've had our finger on the pulse the entire time, while others have refused to read this Disciplinary Matrix out of just sheer laziness, or I just believe that they just accept what comes at them with the NYPD and don't raise any questions, which is what we need to do. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. But I do remember, I remember, John, we would discuss this. I said, listen, this needs to be completely repealed. This needs to be abandoned, and we just need an overhaul and a new disciplinary system. And I remember you said, you think that maybe they'll tweak it. You don't think that they'll get rid of it because it's a political thing. But I think right now, as CCRB and the New York City Council see what's going on with the disciplinary matrix, and we have identified the flaws and how this is a complete flawed doctrine, I think at this point, we may see a turnaround. I think that this needs to be completely removed. And just as alone, we talk about standards, right? What is the standard? You've been saying that, exactly that, because we can show a comparison. We can take cases that are very similar to each other, similar infractions. And how is it that in one case, someone got the mitigating factors when the infractions are the same in someone else's case, so very similar, and they both have time and rank, time on the job. They both have experience. Maybe they're in illustrious units. They've had experience being delegates or other leadership positions within their career, and yet, for one, it's mitigating, and for the other person, it's aggravating. And let's be mindful that those aggravating factors could lead to your termination, and yet the same exact disciplinary process, the same infraction, you could lose one day. I think, John, am I right? I think it's if you lie, it's actual termination with the mitigating factors could be one day. Or there's it might be that one or a different infraction. But how can we go from, the point is this, I'm not sure which one it is, but the point is, how can an aggravating factor lead to termination, but in the same case, the mitigating factor could be one day? That's a huge separation. That's a huge dichotomy with the same factors that attributed to your potential discipline.
I mean, that's a flaw, but I think when you really hone in on the cases and you look at them, you'll see people charged with different allegations for the same incident. And you're going to see, like in the case of Jeffrey Madry, that he actually got to postpone his disciplinary hearing and his disciplinary trial and all that, which I've never heard of before, because we know that Officer Anwar was fired for requesting for a few days postponement until he was able to go through the discovery and speak with his lawyer. He actually got terminated. Ed Caban terminated him, and now Jeffrey Madry's indefinitely putting his CCRB trial off to try to get it thrown out, saying it's not in their purview. But in his case, if you really look at the charges, there's a lot of allegations that are missing, and the ones that are missing, what's the presumptive and the aggravating factors? Because again, you can't tell me that the chief of department doesn't have aggravating factors. If a senior cop gets aggravating factors, the chief of department gets aggravating factors. If a senior cop gets, if a rookie sergeant gets aggravating factors, you can't tell me that the chief of patrol doesn't get aggravating factors. If, whatever, a rookie lieutenant gets aggravating factors, you can't tell me that Kaz Daughtry is no longer a uniform member of the service when he acts as one, but yet when it comes to discipline, they'll shield him from the disciplinary and say, no, he's a civilian member. We don't take those allegations anymore. It's like, no, it's one or the other. If he's a uniform member of service, he's subjected to the same rules and regulations that all uniform members of the service are. So we keep seeing like things are being hidden and allegations aren't being charged, because if the allegations were charged and they are found guilty, the discipline is termination, and now Ed Caban would have to deviate. But they found a back door here, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about this Pro Publica article where Ed Caban is now hiding cases. But he's not doing it to all of them. He's not saying, hey, listen, this system's broken, and I'm going to start to protect my officers, and until the CCRB comes out and starts to actually give us fair trials and then fair investigations, this is the way I'm going to go. I don't believe he's not doing that at all. He's telling you the CCRB is his partners. He's grabbing a few select cases under the radar and investigating them really and burying them. In my opinion, it's burying them. And I think that if the media actually did their job, if the unions actually did their job, and I think we should just call them what they are, the endowment associations. If the endowment associations actually cared about your employment, they cared about you receiving fair discipline, they cared about your health and safety and wellness on the streets of New York, I think they would be jumping up and down and screaming to try to get guys whose careers are hanging on the line for frivolous allegations. And you see this is going on behind the doors. And I don't know if these allegations are frivolous or not, but to me, it doesn't matter. It's corruption through and through.
I want to highlight everything you said. First of all, you're absolutely right. What John said is absolutely right. What's going on here with the disciplinary matrix? Chief of Department, Jeffrey Madry himself, his experience alone, he's the Chief of Department. He is the ultimate top dog in the uniform service. That is an aggravating factor. He's supposed to be the most experienced. He's the leader of the uniform service. every aggravating factor should apply to him. But it's exactly that. That's why the disciplinary matrix is also flawed, because the disciplinary matrix lays out exactly what the automatic penalties are, the aggravating factors are, the mitigating factors are for specific allegations. So what John said is exactly true. That gives them the fantastic opportunity to say, okay, well, Jeffrey Madry's being charged. Here's a particular incident. Here's an infraction. But if we remove these particular allegations, then we don't have to worry about termination. We don't have to explain that he got mitigating factors for particular situations. And this is how they circumvent the entire disciplinary matrix, by omitting allegations. I think that's a fantastic point that you highlighted. Absolutely. Again, and it goes back to the media. The media has been completely timid and docile when it comes to this administration. This is a great opportunity for the media to jump all over this and highlight the fact that the 50A that was fought hard during the George Floyd process, to show the disciplinary process of NYPD, of New York City police officers, to keep the police department restrained, part of this defund the police movement, to show that their information is public record, is a complete farce when it comes to Ed Caban and his cronies. Let's refer to them as his cronies, and also his circle of nepotism. He's taking care of his people. That's why they're saying he's a good guy. It's funny. That's what we see in the NYPD. You and I talk about the nice guy syndrome. As long as they're nice to you, they pat you on the back, and they go out to parties with you, they're good guys. Is he really a good guy? He's a good guy for certain people if you're in the right circle. But if you're general population of the NYPD, is he a good guy for you? Ask yourself. Exactly what John said. If you're in a disciplinary situation, if you're in a process, do you believe that you might get the mitigating factors, or do you think you'll get the aggravating factors and seek your termination under Police Commissioner Ed Caban? Do you feel that he is trustworthy? Do you feel this administration, the upper echelon of the NYPD, is trustworthy in the balance of your career? If you're potentially facing termination from a failed, biased Civilian Complaint Review Board, do you trust that this is the commissioner that you want in your corner? Do you believe that Mayor Eric Adams has your back?
How could Eric Adams have their back? You know, Dermot Shea, when they were pushing the whole 50A and everybody supported it. And, you know, I remember speaking with a lot of executives in the NYPD, and they were all like, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's public record. People should be able. And I remember saying at the time, I was like, oh, do they need to know when my kid goes to school? Does it help public safety if they know where cops' kids go to school? Because that's what you're telling me. None of this makes sense. This doesn't improve public safety by telling people's record, whatever it is, their disciplinary record. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And then why would you trust Eric Adams? He shielded his own disciplinary record. Why is your disciplinary record public record, but Eric Adams is? Why is your arrest record public record, but Eric Adams isn't? I mean, I know why his arrest record isn't, because it's a complete embarrassment, and it shows that he shouldn't even have got paid by the NYPD. But besides that point, you're not subject to either the general population, as Eric said. General population cops are subject to these rules that the hands of the king don't need to be subject to. And I think that's where you see the biggest hypocrisy. That 50A is just another clear example of complete utter nepotism, because they will shield the trial decisions, they will shield their arrest records, their disciplinary records, everything. If you're in the circle of nepotism, then transparency doesn't matter again. All of a sudden, we don't need to be transparent anymore. And just a further note on that, I just recently heard Viral News New York put out NYC. He put out that cops, sergeants, lieutenants, chiefs, commissioners, captains, that their home addresses are being doxxed their home addresses are being doxxed. They're receiving threats at their homes from these little anarchists in New York City. And I just want to say, you know, this is something that we talked about a year ago on this podcast, when we said it's going to get to the point, for their lack of integrity, for their lack of not charging people appropriately, for the lack of not holding DAs accountable to prosecute, it's going to get to the point where they're going to start threatening officers off duty, and they're going to try to steal the sanctity of NYPD officers' home, and ultimately that will lead to corruption. When the system's completely broken, it will ultimately lead to corruption because you're going to have people afraid for their families. So I'm just calling it out right now. We've been saying it for a long time. The individuals that are doing this need to be, instead of investigating me and Eric, instead of having a whole media team look at our team, transcript this podcast, transcript our tweets, instead of doing that, instead of putting our names to Homeland Security and everybody else that constantly on my LinkedIn looking through my pages, instead of doing that for us, giving our opinion, which is our American right, and giving satire about you low integrity individuals, instead of doing that, I think it's time that you investigate these domestic terrorists, you arrest them, you charge them appropriately, and then you advocate to your partners in the district attorney's office to actually prosecute them. Because the sanctity of New York City depends on that. It absolutely depends on that. If you don't, the New York City Police Department will take its default position in the world and once again be the corrupt department that it's been for almost the entirety of its existence.
You're absolutely right. They need to coordinate with their partners, or as John Shell refers to them, as the stakeholders. You know what's interesting also about the stakeholders? District Attorney's Office, Civilian Complaint Review Board, anyone that has a stake in public safety. It's interesting what's going on with the police department. That's why I always say about leadership. It's so important that leadership is at the maximum quality that we could see in the personnel for the New York City Police Department, because at every level, it's a small unit leadership breakdown. We could see the NYPD either thrive or just completely crumble. And I saw, John, I saw a tweet the other day. And again, I've been saying this for the longest time, that the commanding officers throughout the entire city are competing with each other for who's got a better Twitter page. That's what it comes down to. Not how you combat public safety. But there was a commanding officer in the 9th Precinct, and she was walking around talking about how she was with a local council member. And she was talking about how they are holding their stakeholders accountable, that their stakeholders are their partners. And basically, there was a picture of them walking. And it's just complete staged NYPD aura that we see, because this is what the commanding officers see. They see from their leaders, John Shell and Kaz Daughtry, everything is staged. It's about presenting an image to the public, that they're actually holding stakeholders accountable and they're working with their partners. Well, it was absolutely ridiculous, because if you saw in this video, I'm sorry, not in this video, but this photo of the commanding officer of the 9th Precinct, she's walking with a council member, talking about how they're working together to mend the community, but she doesn't even have her firearm in her holster. So it was just completely staged. So we know that they weren't actually walking around. Again, staged. This is failed leadership, and we see it at every level with the NYPD. It's just absolutely ridiculous. No longer is the NYPD credible. It's not the era that we were in, John. John, we were in the best era, the most impenetrable era that we've seen. The only time that we've seen corruption was pretty much because it was a point of opportunity. Did we have corrupt incidents? Yes. Were there police officers that stole? But I do believe most of it was a point of opportunity. But was there a level of corruption that seeped through our era? Not to this level. Absolutely not. I think it was the lowest amount of corruption we've ever seen. But we are back to this level of corruption that the NYPD can no longer be trusted. And again, you can't have it both ways. You either make it completely transparent where everything is public record at every level, small unit leadership breakdown from police to chief of department to the police commissioner, or it's not public record and all these cases are sealed. And I do believe for public safety purposes and for the safety of police officers, these cases should be sealed, because anyone that tries to intercept the police officer's record to use it against them while they're working, to try to intimidate them because they're public record, or find out information about where they live to intimidate them, because John and I spoke about that. And this level of corruption will come because police officers may have to fend for themselves and to protect their families that are home being watched by domestic terrorists. Then they will not be protected by the New York City Police Department, because the New York City Police Department can't protect themselves and they can't protect the public. That's what we're headed for. I do believe that the 50A should be completely secret to the entire public. So, Ed Caban, you're on the right path, but you need to do it for the entire police department, not just for your friends.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I don't think that the NYPD disciplinary record should be secret at all. I think sunlight's the best disinfectant. I think that they are public servants, police officers are public servants. I think that your disciplinary history is subject to Rosario material. I think your disciplinary history is subject to FOIL requests and things of that nature. I don't think that it needs to be readily available to the public for open sourced. I don't think it needs to be open sourced material. Now, if you shot me or you accuse me of a crime, I think your disciplinary record comes into play. We have seen a lot of incidents over time where, you know what, people shouldn't be cops. You know, people, guys, and you know what's a good example of when you're saying, well, look what this individual's done. You know, if Kaz Daughtry is testifying against you in a court of law, you're like, hey, this guy lied on the stand 2 times. Is he really credible? Is he really a credible person that should be testifying against me? Like, if that was me, I wouldn't be held credible. So I think that, you know, like I said, I don't think it should be open source material. I do think and it's subject to Rosario material. It's subject to things of that nature. But for people to go out on the street and just have it on their phone, oh, look, it's Eric Dim. Look what you did, Eric Dim. How does that serve in public safety? How does that help in transparency? How does that make the citizens of New York more safe? It doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. What it does is it emasculates the NYPD. It creates a fear from the average NYPD officer that they don't want to get a complaint. So obviously, what does that do? It stops them from actively being proactive in the NYPD, which is why we used to say 10% of the job does 90% of the work. Now it's probably about 1% of the job does 99% of the work. And everybody else is just sitting around complaining or afraid. And I don't blame them.
Well, let me reflect on what you're saying. I agree with you. When I say that it should be in secret, I think that you made a great point. I don't believe it should be readily available. It shouldn't be accessed by anyone on the internet at any point where you can utilize the information for, listen, it can be utilized for good purposes to make someone better so there's improvement and to be aware of a situation of a police officer. Absolutely. But I don't think it should be exactly what you said, readily available and accessible so easily where you can put your finger on it and you can easily manipulate it and twist it. I do believe it should be something that has to be requested and it should be presented for specific purposes, just as we have in a trial. It's called Giglio material, right? When a police officer is going to testify in a case to show their credibility, their disciplinary history will then be record for that case because then it can reflect on their credibility. So if you're Kaz Daughtry and you're going to testify, well, you have been found guilty and you actually admitted to that guilt and you pled guilty and you received discipline for that. So the question could be, do you find this police officer credible in this particular trial? So again, if you're in a situation where you're going to testify at administrative trial, I think then your disciplinary history could reflect on that. I just do not think that it should be public record where anyone could access it because it can be manipulated for malicious intent.
No, absolutely. And then even these cases, I think that the cases should be public. I do. I think that the when it goes to the trial room and things of that nature, I think it needs to public, but I don't think it needs to be public for the eternity. I just don't. After an officer retires from the NYPD, I think the disciplinary record should then be sealed. I think not only the disciplinary record, but cases that they were involved in. You know, if you want to say, well, there's other officers on that case, okay, keep it open until that officer retires. Because once they retire and they're in good standing with the NYPD, I don't think that these things need to be readily available for public information any further at that point. So this article is from Pro Publica. It's titled, you know, it's definitely a lefty title. New Yorkers were choking, beaten, and tased by NYPD officers. The police commissioner buried their cases. I mean, this is, you know, I mean, the title of it, you know, it almost makes me not want to read it because it's, you know, police officers will use force. So New York City Police Commissioner Ed Caban has repeatedly used a little known authority called retention to prevent officers accused of misconduct from facing public disciplinary trials. Victims are never told their cases have been buried. Now they're going to go into a case of Brianna Villafane. Let's look at Brianna's case. I don't remember this, but Brianna Villafane was in Lower Manhattan protesting police violence in the summer of 2020. When officers charged into the crowd, one of them gripped her hair and yanked her to the ground. I felt someone on top of me. It was hard to breathe, she said. I felt like I was being crushed. The New York City Civilian Oversight Agency that examines allegations of police abuse investigated and concluded that the officer had engaged in such serious misconduct that it could constitute a crime. Villafane received a letter from the agency about its conclusion. I was happy and relieved, she recalled. The next step would be a disciplinary trial overseen by the New York City Police Department, which prosecutors from the oversight agencies would present evidence and question the officers in a public forum. Then last fall, police commissioner intervened. Exercising a little-known authority called retention, the commissioner, Edward Caban, ensured the case would never go to trial. Instead, Caban reached his own conclusion in private. He decided it would be detrimental to the police department's disciplinary process to pursue administrative charges against the officer, Gerard Dowling. According to the letter the department sent to the oversight agency, the force that used against Villafane was reasonable and necessary. The commissioner ordered no discipline. Today, Dowling is a deputy chief of a unit that handles protests throughout the city. He is one of dozens of cases in which Caban has used the power of his office to intervene in disciplinary cases against officers who were found by the oversight agency to have committed misconduct. Eric, what do you think about this case on its face?
Another quintessential case just highlights everything that we talk about when it comes to nepotism, the circle of nepotism concealing these cases. Absolutely. It's absolutely ridiculous because I was involved in these protests. I worked these riots. I had disciplinary cases. My case is a public record. My case is a public record for the George Floyd riots. Why would any cases be hidden to the public? They should be all transparent. Again, is rank an aggravating factor or is rank a mitigating factor? Or is mitigating factor exactly what we've been saying? The circle of nepotism. Replace mitigating with nepotism. This is exactly what we've been saying. It's a quintessential case. It reflects on it. We see case after case after case that we can exemplify, and we can actually demonstrate to you how the New York City Police Department disciplinary process is corrupted by nepotism. Again, you see it right here.
100%. I mean, how many CCRB allegations were made during the summer of 2020? How many people faced disciplinary hearings? How many people were found guilty of frivolous CCRB charges, and the police commissioner did not intervene at all? At all. So, I mean, even if this allegation, I don't know the case, I didn't see the video, I'm going to say right now, in my opinion, more than likely, this girl was acting completely irrational. Gerard Dowling did absolutely nothing wrong. He did his job. From me reading this article, that's how I see it. I mean, this is my biased police perspective point of view. So I see that he probably did absolutely nothing wrong. But why is it that his case was shielded from going the route that everyone else is? Why is that? That is an unfair disciplinary process. That on its face takes an incident where he did absolutely nothing wrong and brings the seeds of corruption into the NYPD. Because again, there were hundreds upon hundreds, including a lot of your allegations, including a lot of things that you still in retirement have to answer for. And yours weren't shielded. Why was Gerard Dowling shielded? Why were these cases taken this route? If the system is fair, if the system is just, there's no need for it to go this way. This is removing public transparency and breeding the seeds of corruption in the NYPD.
Well, that's my point exactly, right? This is supposed to be about transparency. Whether you're found not guilty or you're guilty, the outcome of the case is not supposed to be what's actually important to reflect on for public record. The point is, what was the allegation? What were the semantics? What was the surrounding story? What was the background information to provide about a particular incident, whether you were found guilty or not? And for an opportunity for the public to see, was this person found guilty? What were the allegations in this particular case? Who was the complainant? These are supposed to be the particulars that are available to the public. But it's interesting because I believe, and I don't have the information, I believe that the argument to this would be for the safety of this particular
Oh, we just lost you for a second, Eric. Oh, what's going on here? We backed out a little bit.
I didn't even notice. Did I?
Yeah, you backed out. Sorry, yeah, you froze up. You said for
no
the
problem.
safety of this particular,
right, for the safety of this particular chief, and also they could argue and say, well, it's not necessary. Chief acted appropriately and didn't do anything wrong, and I believe that argument is there just from reading this case, and I was there during these riots. I know how these actors were behaving, so I'm sure that the chief didn't do anything wrong. But the fact is that it's not open to public record is a hypocrisy. That my case, where I was found not guilty in administrative trial, is open to public record. So what exactly is the standard? The standard, again, goes back to nepotism. We see it over and over. Rank could be an aggravating factor for general population, but that rank could also be nepotism if you're in the right circle. So God bless. Get yourself in the right circle. If you're Hispanic, you should join the Hispanic Society now. And if you're not Hispanic, you could identify as anything you want in the New York City Police Department. You should join the Hispanic Society today and become.
Yeah, absolutely. The nepotism. We just lost you again, Eric, if you could hear me. We're seeing more and more of this. So let's see. Since becoming commissioner last July, he has short-circuited cases involving officers accused of only using chokeholds, deploying tasers, and beating protesters with baton. A number of episodes were so serious that the police oversight agency, known as the Civilian Complaint Review Board, completed the officers likely committed crimes. As typical across the United States, New York City's police commissioner has the final say over officer discipline. Commissioners can do and often overrule civilian oversights, but Caban's actions stand out for ending cases before the public disciplinary process plays out. When a police department is doing what the police department is doing here is shutting down cases under the cloak of darkness, says Florence L. Finkel, a former head of the CCRB and current vice president of the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. Avoiding disciplinary trials means there's no opportunity for transparency, no opportunity for the public to weigh in, because nobody knows what's happening. Indeed, the department does not publish the commissioner's decision to retain cases, and the Civilian Oversight Agency makes those details public only months after the fact. Civilians are not told that the police department ended their cases. To piece together Caban's actions, Pro Publica attained internal records of some cases and learned details of others using public record, lawsuits, and social media accounts and other sources. Retention has been the police commissioner's chief method of intervention. He has prevented the cases of 54 officers from going to trial in his roughly 1 year in office, far more than his other commissioner, according to the analysis of CCRB data. His predecessor, Keechant Sewell, did it 8 times in her first year, even as she faced more disciplinary cases.
I would definitely like to get the data on these cases of how many people in these particular cases that Ed Caban has a relationship with, how many people are potentially in the Hispanic Society, how many of these people that got the mitigating factors that had omitted allegations, how many of them have a high rank, just as Chief Jeffrey Mandry, the chief of the department, prior delegates. I would like to get the data on I would love to get the data on the actual background of each officer and what is their connection to Ed Caban, because I'm sure their connection to Ed Caban will change the game, and we could do a great analysis and see a perspective here that's going to highlight exactly what we talk about with the disciplinary matrix, how the disciplinary matrix is flawed when you have a flawed upper echelon. When you have immature, inept, inadequate, and just misuse of power, the disciplinary matrix can be manipulated, and exactly what we see, it can be weaponized and used against you if you're in general population. I think that the disciplinary matrix, if we had proper leadership and we didn't have an egregious amount of nepotism, it could be used properly. But it can't be used properly when this is the type of leadership that we have. Failed leadership. We need a complete overhaul. We've been saying it. The New York City Police Department is an epic fail. We need a complete overhaul. We need them removed immediately because this is corrupt. That's exactly what this is. This is a high level of corruption. The nepotism equals corruption in the NYPD.
Yeah, so 54 cases out of hundreds. Keechant Sewell had thousands, right? And she did it 8 times. I want to know what those 8 times were too. I would love to know the background on those officers too. Why? If you're the police commissioner, Ed, I'm gonna give you a piece of leadership advice here. If you're the police commissioner and you feel that the CCRB investigative process is corrupt, if you feel that you need to utilize this to save and protect officers' careers, then it should be every case. You should be retaining every case. And as a leader, for someone who says they believe in transparency, for someone who has the entirety of the department that he runs going out on social media every day, talking about building community trust, putting out these political theater Twitter posts, like Eric had just pointed out that one. We got a couple of memes coming for that one, by the way. But that'll be in the next coming days. But if you feel that that's the case, you should have been retaining all of these cases, and then to show true leadership, making them public. But instead, you hid them in the cloak of darkness because, again, integrity is not welcome in New York City. It's not welcome in the chocolate administration. It's not going to get you ahead in the New York City Police Department, obviously. So I'm saying right here, all I am reading is corruption, corruption, corruption. And you take a guy like Gerard Dowling, who's been out on New York City streets dealing with this nonsense every night, who's been doing it for a very long time, and you're bringing his good name. You're bringing his good name through the mud because of your inept, corrupt actions. I mean, it really is. It's a smear on the face of the NYPD. It's disgusting to read this. It's disgusting to hear this. And again, I'm saying right now that I believe that 99.9% of these allegations that were made against officers were absolutely, absolutely ridiculous. And I know one that's probably going to make its way through here. And I bet it's going to be a lieutenant that wears khaki pants that stepped on somebody's head.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Stomped on his head. You're not kidding. This is absolutely ridiculous. We have demonstrated how the NYPD's disciplinary system is completely corrupt. The disciplinary matrix cannot be trusted. You could admit allegations, because if the allegations are actually proper and we actually address everyone in the same manner, everyone would get the aggravating factors. Everything that you do in the police department is an aggravating factor. They could say, well, you have 1 day in uniform and you were trained 6 months in the police academy. You have the proper training. You have aggravating factors. The disciplinary matrix is completely flawed. Again, everything that we do could be an aggravating factor, and that could also be manipulated into a mitigating factor if you're in the circle of nepotism. You know, I agree with you. We should look at Keyshawn Sewell's case and see what were those 8 cases. Every case should be identified. Mayor Eric Adams said that there were extraordinary circumstances in the particular case with Kimberly Lucas, who was a female police officer, who was also a delegate, who lied to the police department that she received the vaccine mandate. She produced 2 fake vaccine cards. She had numerous opportunities to come forward, to come clean and tell the truth. And she received the mitigating factors, which is part of the circle of nepotism. But according to Eric Adams, she had extraordinary circumstances to get those mitigating factors. Now, what's interesting about that, let's note this. Every time that a police commissioner deviates from the findings in administrative trial or the civilian complaint review board in a civilian complaint trial itself with the panel, and or an administrative trial from the police department, if there's a deviation from that matrix, the police commissioner has to have an articulate letter detailed of why he deviated from it, to show why there were mitigating factors to deviate from that specific penalty. So in that particular case with Kimberly Lucas, I think that would be a great quintessential case for us to look at for the public, because we talk about transparency. That should be public record, and we should see why in this particular case he deviated from the findings. What were the extraordinary circumstances other than what we believe to be as nepotism to deviate from this case?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is just further of Eric Adams contradicting himself on everything. The under the radar the move runs counter to Mayor Eric Adams' pledge during his candidacy to improve policing by building trust through transparency. This year, in his State of the City address, Adams also promised that cases of alleged misconduct would not languish for months. In a statement to Pro Publica, a spokesperson for the mayor's office defended the police department and Caban's record. Mayor Adams has the full confidence in Caban's leadership and ability to thoroughly review all allegations of police misconduct and adjudicate accordingly. A police department spokesperson declined to answer detailed questions, responding instead with a one-sentence statement. The NYPD continues to work closely with the Civilian Complaint Review Board in accordance with the terms of the Memorandum of Understanding, or an MOU, as they constantly call it. That memorandum stemmed from political compromise reached about a decade ago, concerned that the department's policing tactics were too aggressive, and members of New York City Council pushed for the CCRBs to be able to prosecute cases rather than to simply make recommendations to the police commissioner. The final memorandum, produced after protracted negotiations with the police department, included a mechanism that has since allowed Caban to intervene in disciplinary cases. The agreement states that the commissioner may take cases away from CCRB prosecutors if the commissioner determines that allowing agency to move ahead will be detrimental to the police department's disciplinary process, or if the interest of justice would not be served. Chris Dunn, the legal director of the New York City Civil Liberties Unit, objected at the time to that veto power, shown the number of cases that the Caban has retained, told Publica. This is exactly why we were concerned about this authority.
I think it's a great article. I think it's very detailed. I think actually these small journalism, these small organizations, journalism, are doing a far better job than Daily News and New York Post when it comes to actually articulating mishaps and faults and inadequacies of this administration of the police department in comparison to mainstream media. Mainstream media has been completely hands-off when it comes to the police department. Mayor Eric Adams, I think they've created an extreme amount of distance, and they've been very careful on what they report on. Again, this just shows there's a flawed disciplinary system with the NYPD. It's completely corrupted. And in the hands of Ed Caban, which is supposedly trusted by Mayor Eric Adams, the public could see, especially two lieutenants that are completely hated by the police department. We can tell you that right now this is a corrupted system, and it's completely lost any credibility. It's compromised integrity, and it's compromised integrity under the behest of Police Commissioner Ed Caban, who is completely insignificant. He has no place to be in the role of police commissioner. What we see right now with these useful idiots that's going on with the upper echelon of the NYPD is just a complete misuse of power. We see them being, they want to be superstars. They want to be celebrities. We're misusing taxpayer money. We're misusing the police department. It's affected public safety. It's affected morale of the police department. It's only going to go further. The disciplinary system is an important process for the progression, the trajectory of police officers' career, which ultimately affects public safety. And it's in the hands of a complete idiot.
I mean, it's sad. It's a sad state of affairs, and the thing that, I spoke about earlier, where the home addresses of cops, like people are going after the cops. I just want to back up real quick because, for those of you that are new, that just started listening to me and Eric, our private, personal addresses, our family's history, basically everything that's private about our lives was ran in department computers hundreds of times and given to people who were not cops, by the way. One, we don't know who ran our names. We don't know why they ran our names. This is prior to us being under investigation for giving our opinions. But prior to that, and we were threatened by nefarious underworld criminals who have ties to the New York City Police Commissioner. And our only recourse for this is to file a complaint with the NYPD's Internal Affairs Bureau, who has done everything to omit subjects, omit allegations, omit investigative steps in order to deem us uncredible or our allegations basically not, and make our allegations not credible, to unsubstantiate or to not be able to prove, even though we have undeniable evidence from the people that we complained about themselves, obviously, because they're not so smart and they did this all online. But now we're going to see, like, when I think about that and I read this, all I see is that case One, when we go to foil the investigative steps, they'll just block it. We won't be given access for public transparency to see that. Two, even if they did, those steps will never be known, right? Those steps will never be known to the public. They'll never be known to Eric or Sal. But let's say we did have a fair investigative process and somebody with integrity actually investigated our cases and substantiated the charges against Ed Caban, John Shell, Kaz Daughtry, the two low integrity lieutenants in CRT, the captain, their little lackeys that are with them, their rookie lackeys. Say they substantiated all that and did that. When it comes time to the disciplinary process, Ed Caban could just grab that case, say, nope, not going to do that, hide it completely from us. No charges will ever happen to the cops. And you see collusion between the NYPD and underworld figures to go after critics of them, critics of Eric Adams, and people that are pointing out corruption in New York City. So I think when I look at it from my own personal standpoint and from our standpoint, again, it's pure, utter corruption. Eric Adams has no integrity. And I think that there needs to be a process put in place in New York City to recall the mayor, because obviously the mayor's running the New York City Police Department at this point. And it's honestly, is it a high level of corruption? Possibly. Is it corruption though? Yes.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up. At the same token, I think corruption is extremely subjective, right? I mean, because we could actually look at this and say, well, it is a high level of corruption. Anything that affects public safety, it's corrupt. It's corrupting the system. And what is corrupting the system? It's manipulating the system. It's manipulating the system to the benefit of Mayor Eric Adams, to the benefit of Ed Caban, to the benefit of the upper echelon of the NYPD, to take care of what I've been saying for the longest time, right, John? We talk about in the podcast all the time. I say that these guys pave the way for their offspring, or because they have their own self-serving needs in their own benefit to move on with their careers. This, I believe, in my opinion, is a high level of corruption. I think the fact that, just if you look at our case, right, again, John and I never thought that we'd ever actually make a claim with the internal affairs. And it's not because that we're off the job right now or retired, you know what, that we'll make a claim. Never did we expect or intend to make a complaint with the internal affairs. The allegations that we were getting, the smear campaign, the libel that we faced, the nefarious characters, we were pretty tolerant of it. But at some point when they started to threaten the lives of our kids, they crossed the line. And there is boundaries and limitations for everyone. And we saw those boundaries. And yet, at this point, the internal affairs refused to provide the information to us to keep us safe. And again, I agree. I think that's exactly what you're doing. We know that's what you're doing, internal affairs. You're protecting your buddies right now. You're protecting the upper echelon of the police department because we know they're the ones that have the final say. Again, this is why we made the argument that should internal affairs be an independent watchdog in comparison and similar to the Civilian Complaint Review Board. The Civilian Complaint Review Board, I believe, should fall under the purview of the police department and have police perspective. But the internal affairs, I believe, that should be outsourced an independent watchdog because the police department cannot be trusted to investigate their own when it's upper echelon who outranks the internal affairs that are doing the investigation. Just a complete failure. It's an epic fail, and that would be for any administration, but this administration in particular that misuses their power, they cannot be trusted. And we can see this case, and we'll keep you up to date. If anyone has any questions on the progress and what's going on with our case, we will keep you informed. Just email us, www.thefinestunfiltered.com. It's a complete epic fail. At this point, a nefarious character who was an unhinged police officer is no longer with the NYPD. We still do not know the identity of this police officer that used a fake moniker to threaten our families. And let that be known. And to the police officers out there that know the information and they did not reveal it, you never reported to the internal affairs. You also are part of that corruption also.
Yeah, I didn't even mention that unhinged. I forgot totally about that. There's some unhinged cop who was forced out of the NYPD who running around who threatened myself and Eric's children, and the NYPD will not give us the identity of the officer. refuses to give us the identity of the officer. So I think that, again, complete, utter corruption. Internal Affairs Bureau is completely corrupted. The NYPD is completely corrupted. Corruption in the 90s when we were kids was really like bottom up corruption. It was more like individual officers going out on the streets of New York City, robbing people, robbing drug dealers, doing things like that, beating people. That was the form of corruption. Now you're seeing high level corruption. The NYPD is corrupted top down. Right? It's top down corruption is what we're seeing. And that will spread to obviously what we're seeing with this, because there's a lot of room for corruption here now. There's a lot of room for people, officers to rob people, beat people, do things that are completely against the law. And they could be completely shielded by Ed Caban. They get into Madry's case a little bit here, and let's get into that. Last year, the mayor reportedly urged Sewell to reject the recommended disciplinary action against a top uniform officer who was also an Adams ally. They're talking about Jeffrey Madry. She declined and pushed to discipline the officer, resigned shortly afterward. Mr. Adams then appointed another close ally to the position, Caban. Caban has his own history with disciplinary process. Over his 30 years on the force, he has twice been found by the CCRB to have engaged in misconduct, making him an outlier in the department. The vast majority of officers have never been found by the oversight agency to have committed any misconduct. In one case, he was ordered to complete more training after he arrested a civilian for not providing an ID. And the other related to refusing to provide the names of officers to a civilian who said they had mistreated her. There was no record of discipline. The police department did not comment on Caban's record, but it previously said Caban's awareness of that process will only help him bring a fair and informed point of view to those important decisions. Caban recently rejected a discipline in a case in which two officers had killed a man in his own apartment during a mental health crisis. The chair of the review board criticized the decision, a move that earned Adams ire. She also requested more resources to investigate complaints, which rose 50% last year. Instead, the Adams administration imposed cuts, forcing the board to stop investigating various kinds of misconduct, officers who lie on the job.
Again, it's funny when they say officers lie on the job, right? We're just showing lack of integrity. How could that actually be held and have any weight to it when the actual upper echelon of the police department lacks credibility, and most of them have been in cases where they lied themselves, were found not guilty, or either the allegation and the evidence, preponderance of evidence, is there that they actually lied? How can we actually trust them to hold any credibility when it comes to the police department? John Schell himself was involved in a case where he claimed he was an accidental discharge where someone lost their life. An adversary meant their demise. Now, I don't know the entire particulars and context of that actual encounter he had. It was a potential, it was an arrest situation, it appears, but apparently he had.
Uh-oh, we lost Eric again, and he's frozen on a good face. I should make a meme out of that one. We lost you again, Eric.
You lost me? Okay.
Yeah.
Is there something with StreamYard today? That's all good.
It's definitely you, bro. It's you. You're a rambling man, bro.
Anyway,
what were you saying?
No, listen, the point is, how can we trust that this police department could hold credibility and weight to it when most of the upper echelon themselves have been in situations where they lied, they plead guilty to it, or the allegation was there of lying? We see that that's a common theme that's going on with this upper echelon. We have absolutely no integrity. And again, I always say it's small unit leadership breakdown. And if there's no integrity at the top, we could sure as hell, even though we support the rank and file, it's going to seep through and it's going to make its way through the entire ranks. And we're going to see the fall of the police department as we're seeing it now.
Yeah, I think we nailed it, man. Like, listen, the Pro Publica article, they're definitely an anti-police. There's a twinge to it, right? Because they're talking about the case of Kowalski Treywick. And again, me and Eric said the officers did absolutely nothing wrong. We agree with the police department's decision. We agree with Ed Caban not disciplining those officers. But again, that was a transparent public decision. And that's what we're saying. The New York City Police Department needs to be a transparent organization. It should not operate in darkness. That's what's happening, and it's only operating in darkness some of the times. I don't believe it should operate in darkness any of the times. It's a public good. It's a public service. If we really, truly want to build community relations, we have to tell people the truth. We have to make the process transparent. When you do these things under the shade of darkness, you breed public mistrust. People turn away from the police department. People turn away from government. You breed in a corrupt society. You breed corruption back into the New York City Police Department. And I think that that's exactly what's going on at this point.
Yeah, I think we nailed it here, brother. Absolutely. The point of this is exactly that. For the police department to be trusted, right? We need the police department to be trusted by the community. The overwhelming majority of the community has to trust the police department so that they feel safe and that the police department can actually carry out their mission, which is ultimately prosperity to their health and their wellness, just as Mayor Eric Adams says, through public safety. And I say that because the overwhelming majority think residents.
Yeah, you're glitching out again, bro. You just left us again. All right. But listen, anyway, we'll wrap it up. But is nepotism... Yeah, you glitched out again.
I glitched sorry.
Yeah, is nepotism corrupting the NYPD's disciplinary system? I mean, we did a spoiler alert yesterday. The answer is absolutely, overwhelmingly, yes. And not only is it corrupting the NYPD's disciplinary system, it's corrupting the NYPD as a whole. Eric, you want to end before we go?
Listen, no, thank you so much for watching us. I apologize for a couple of glitches. It's definitely because it's July 4th weekend. It's super big.
Eric is saying that he loves you and he appreciates you and to keep going. So everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back at you shortly. This week, we're going to be putting out episodes sparingly throughout the week. And as always, you're going to get the Sunday 8 p.m. Today's Sunday. This one will come out at 8 p.m. tonight. We're going to do some lives. We're going to start to do that as we've been doing the last few weeks. We got a lot of good comment on it. And as always, we appreciate you. Finest Unfiltered. We'll be back at you.
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.